Let's get some price picks in today, guys. The picks from the most recent video went 4-2, so now we're on an 8-2 run in the past two videos. It is, and this one here on Derek Lively and Luka Doncic could have gone your way if you got it a bit later. I know Kyrie got ruled out, so essentially Doncic's line moved up to 10.5, and Derek Lively moved up to 9.5. So you would have got this 9 here. So it could have been a 5-1 for you depending on when you watch the video. So overall, the YouTube's been on a decent run, but the Discord and just general picks have not been on a good run. I mean, I could just show you this and say that we're on a crazy run and just post a screenshot of this in community tab, say, yeah, we're winning everything, but that's not the reality. Yes, we did cash this 10x and almost cash this 6 for 6. But if I show you the Discord profits, which is always in the description of every single video, fully transparent with what happens in the Discord. This week was actually a terrible down week here, minus 24.5. Actually, no, even more than that. If I drag all the way to the bottom here, minus 25.6 units. And that's right here, week 10, minus 25.6. This is sort of the graph of how the Discord has been going throughout the weeks. So I started about 10 weeks ago, and this is kind of where we're at. We had a peak of 360 units, and we are down actually 70 units in the past few weeks. A lot of people won't show you this. They'll just say they win every single day. I do not win every single day. I'll tell this to every single person who joins the Discord. I won't even win every single week, but you could see the consistency over 10 weeks, which is long run. 10 weeks is pretty long run. If you're not up in 10 weeks, you're probably doing something wrong. 211.65 units up. Yes, the past 3 weeks have been a bit rough, but just in this month alone, January 2024, we're still up 25.4 units despite the 2 bad weeks. Because when you have good weeks, they're really good weeks. As you can see, 86.9 units, 58.4. I'm just showing you this because a lot of people just don't show their Discord units. People don't even track this. They have Discords. They don't even tell you how much they're making, how much you could make. I'm being fully transparent with that because when people join, I want them to have a realistic idea of what it is to make money on price picks. And when you're playing a lot of 6 flexes like this, you're going to have slips that don't go well. You're also going to have slips where you're one off. You're also going to have slips where you're playing 5 for 5 and you get them. But that is the reality. I'm not playing 2 powers in my Discord. I'm not playing 3 powers. I could win those every single day, but I know every Discord that's playing 2 powers in the long run is not making money. Like, the customers are not making money. People have made thousands in my Discord. Yes, if you joined recently, you'd be down. Completely honest. But as time goes on and if you stick with it, you will be up, just like in this case here. If you joined this week and you're down 6.4 units, you would have been up 35. The same is not true recently, but there's something called negative variance in sports betting. Of course, sports bets don't always go your way, so it is possible to have bad weeks if things don't go your way. In this case, the Smart Andrews pick here, if this was Zay Flowers instead, this would have been a 25x, so a 5 into 125 rather than a $5 into $10. So you can see how these little minuscule things that kind of go wrong on a day-to-day basis could really affect your profits. That's all I have to say in terms of the Discord. I will be recapping every single Monday, so that's why I'm doing it today. And the sheet is always in the second link in the description. Nothing to hide here. So I'm going to go here on price picks and get into the picks. I'm going to be doing another 6 flex, and I think I'm going to start getting into 6 flexes more often. I was kind of drifting off a bit. I was doing like 1, 2, 3 picks a day. Let's just stick with the 6 flexes. I'm going to be doing full 6 flexes per day, and eventually they're going to hit, and you're going to see you're going to get that nice 25xer. So if we hit one in the next 25 days, we're essentially on a really good path. And the last one I gave was a 4-2 or a 5-1, depending on when you watch. So you still made a bit of money there. But you're going to see these are not going to hit. They're not going to hit very often, but when they do, you're going to cash big. I'm creating slips that have the highest probability of actually hitting the 6 for 6. So if these go for like 0-6, 1-6, that's kind of intended because I'm taking sort of correlated slips in a way. Obviously, it's NBA. It's not as correlated as the NFL, but in a way, I'm looking for sort of trends in certain teams, certain players that are going to hit together or not hit together. So let's just start it off with these 2 Bucks players. That's going to explain what I'm kind of talking about here. I'm going to start with Giannis on the under 31.5 points, and I'll pair that up with Brook Lopez on the over 11.5 points. So you can see if Giannis is having a super good game and crushing this, like getting 50 points, obviously Brook Lopez is less likely to go over his 11.5 points. That's kind of what I mean. It's very possible that this goes 0-2, but I'm putting it because I think it's more likely to go 2-0. So let's start with Brook Lopez over points here. He is set at 12.5 on one sportsbook, 11.5 on every single other sportsbook, with juice towards that over all the way up at minus 133, minus 125, minus 125. If you don't know what that means, it basically means these sportsbooks all agree that the over is more likely to happen in this case. So minus 125 with juice towards the over, minus 105 on the under, essentially means they're estimating Brook Lopez to have about a 52% chance to go over that 11.5 points. Now, why is that important? Because now you know not to take the under, because there's only a 48% chance that he goes under. But also when you're on price picks, a lot of these props, they're trying to make them 50% odds to hit. So you want to be looking for props with a slight edge and getting even more of an edge by sort of pairing players together within the same team or within the same game. So Brook Lopez on the over 11.5 points looks good because there is juice towards his over, but it also looks good for a couple other reasons. So first of all, you see this graph right here at 12.5 points. He has only gone over 50% of the time. But you can see how that one extra point gets us an extra 4% that he's gone over, which makes sense, right? one extra point is very important, especially when you're at only 12.5 points. If you're at like 35-point prop, it might not matter as much, but at 11.5, it's super important, especially with Brook Lopez, who's taking threes. If he's like 9 points and he takes a three, he's cashing the over 11.5, not cashing the over 12.5. So I'm really liking this. At 11.5, you get the extra 4% on that hit rate. As for the actual matchup, of course, it is a bit of a tougher one here. Denver at home, -4 spread to Denver. So it is expected to be a pretty tight game throughout the whole game, especially with this total pretty decent here, 238.5, expecting quite a bit of points. Now, the reason I went with Giannis on the under points and Brook Lopez on the over points, well, first of all, it's the juice, but also Giannis is a game time decision. Realistically, I think he's going to play, but if he doesn't, of course, that helps Brook Lopez. It's pretty obvious if Giannis is out, Brook Lopez points prop is going to jump up to like 12.5, maybe even 13 points. But also because Giannis does have juice on this under. It's slight juice towards the end on every single sports book. But again, there's that relationship between if Giannis is not doing well, or at least not scoring points, he's probably assisting more, which he has been doing quite recently. I'll show that in a little bit. Giannis is probably going to be dishing the ball out more to Beasley and more to Brook Lopez, obviously meaning he's getting less points but more assists. So in all honesty, it does make sense to grab the over 6.5 assists too, which is on the Prizepicks board right now too. But the juice is kind of conflicted here. You can see -125 on the unders, -120 on the overs. But I do want to show here, in his last 10 games, he's averaging 7.6 assists. Look at this, 9, 10, 10, 9, 10, 11. He's really popping off here. 4 assists here, 5, 6, and 2 there. And then in the last 5, he's averaging 8.4. Last 15, 7.7. So he has really been assisting recently. Look at his average on the season, 6.2. And if you look at the left side of the season, it's pretty low averages on terms of the assist props. And more recently, he's been really assisting a lot. His assist prop used to be set pretty often at 4.5, 5.5. Now it's all the way up at 6.5, sometimes even 7.5. It also means he's averaging a bit less points. He's averaging 31 on the season. In the last 10, 30.6. And in the last 5, 29.8. So see, in these games where he's getting these crazy assist numbers, he's obviously not getting as many points because the people around him are getting the points instead. As I said, for the matchup, I am liking Brook Lopez over better here. If we check Fantasy Pros on the points allowed to certain positions, this is versus centers. And if we sort from the top in points allowed, you could see Denver is here at about 19th in points allowed, which is not amazing, right? It's not like it's the top 5 team, top 5 worst team, but it's still much better than the power forward position where Giannis plays. If we check Denver, they're all the way at the bottom. So they're actually a very strong team against the power forward. They're 5th in points allowed. So you can see this sort of discrepancy in where the points could come from in this specific game versus Denver. They have not played Denver yet this season, but I do think it's an easier matchup for Brook Lopez than Giannis here. So Brook Lopez over 11.5 points, right? If Giannis is going under his points, more likely for Brook Lopez to go over. Giannis probably getting more assists. That is the general concept for this slip here, as well as the juice that's favoring Brook Lopez over 11.5 points, and Giannis is under 31.5 points. Just to quickly show you the relationship between Giannis and Brook a bit closer in the last 10 games, I tagged all the games where Brook Lopez played with Giannis, and then all the games where Giannis played with Brook Lopez. See right away in this Houston game, when Giannis popped off and dropped 48 points, of course, Brook Lopez only dropped 7 points and went under his prop. In this Jazz game here, they both went under, which is just a discrepancy. Obviously not going to go under over every single game, but Boston right here, Giannis went under, and then Brook Lopez went over. Golden State game, Brook Lopez went under, and then Giannis went over. Then this string of 3 games, Sacramento, Detroit, Giannis went under. This is where his line was set, so 31.5. Also in these games here, under, and then Brook Lopez over. And in these last 3 games, Brook Lopez went under, over, while Giannis went over, under. That's 8 in the past 10 games that they've gone in opposite directions. Of course, the trend is there throughout the season. I've checked that too, but that is essentially what I'm going with here on Giannis under points, Brook Lopez over points. Now, the second combination of players I did take last video, I'm pretty sure, and that's going to be on Sengun on his over 4.5 assists is what I wanted it at, but unfortunately got bumped as I'm recording this video. But I think this one is a bit too good to skip out on, so I'm still going to take it at 5 assists, which I normally never do, but I just like it that much that I'm going to take it at 5. If this gets exactly 5, I'm going to be a bit triggered, but it is what it is. So 5 assists on Alperen Sengun, and then Dylan Brooks on the over 11.5 points. Let's take a closer look at Dylan Brooks here. Very nice juice on that over 11.5. The smallest one is at -125. Similar to Brook Lopez, they're projected about a 52 to 53% chance that he goes over this 11.5 points. Very good splits throughout the season here. 58% hit rate in general. And then I just like this matchup versus the Lakers. I think to see here is Lakers defense is 30th in 3 points allowed and 22nd in 3-point percentage. He does have that 3 ball in him, and his odds are kind of set towards him getting about 1 3 this game. But if he does hit 2 threes, that is going to be very nice for us. There's a high probability that at least one of those threes is going to be assisted by Sengun. Obviously, they could both be assisted by VanVleet, but one thing for sure is that they're going to be assisted. And just in general, Dillon Brooks field goals will be assisted. You could check his scoring charts here on NBA.com. So straight from the source here, 98.5% of his threes are assisted, which of course makes sense. Also, 61% of his 2-point field goals are also assisted. So in general, about 75% of his points, so of that 12 points, about 9 of those are going to be assisted. And who's going to be getting those assists? Likely Sengun and likely Van Vliet. But picture a case where Sengun assists 9 out of Dillon Brooks' 12 points. If Dillon Brooks does go over, that's going to be 4 straight assists for Sengun. That's where we're grabbing him on the over 5 assists. At 4.5, it was a no-brainer. Look at all the juice on the over 4.5, which is where I wanted him at. We're going to have to unfortunately settle for 5. So 60% hit rate at 4.5 is great to see, but also these splits more recently, last 10, 5.3 average. Last 5, 6.6 average. Last 15 is a bit lower. But if we throw in Dillon Brooks here with Sengun, his splits get even better here. 67% hit rate on that throughout the season with Dillon Brooks. So, of course, it makes sense. A lot of the assists towards Dillon Brooks are going to be from Sengun here. 5.8 average last 10, 6.6 last 5, and 5.2 last 15. So, obviously, this is a very, very high push potential line. 50% of the time this season, he has at least pushed this. I'd love to have it at 4.5, but you can see there's a ton of push lines at 5, which I don't mind. We're going to be putting this into a 6 flex, and we're going to only have 1 push line in this. I'm not going to be too mad if there's 1 push only. Also liking the overs here because of this nice matchup with Houston at home here. Lakers -1 favorites and pretty decent total at 232. This is going to be a tough game. It's going to be a tight game, but it's going to be a lot of minutes for both these starters. If we check the actual matchups versus the positions that we're playing here, so small forward for Dillon Brooks here, they're about 17th in points allowed against the small forward, which is nothing crazy, about middle of the pack. But it's when you check versus the centers, they're actually quite good defensively. 5th in points allowed against the center position, which is going to allow Sengun to be passing the ball more and maybe getting less buckets and dishing the ball out towards Dillon Brooks. So very similar concepts in both these stacks here, and we're going to end it off with one in Sacramento. We're going to grab Sabonis on his under 8.5 assists. We're going unders on this one, under 8.5 assists there, and then Kevin Huerter, let me just type that in correctly here, on the under 11.5 points versus Memphis. I think there's a bit of a snooze matchup here. -9 spread for Sacramento away with a 225 total. That is pretty low. Like Sacramento, I'm going to see them getting like maybe 120 points in the game. It's not a lot of points and not a lot of opportunity for people to go over their points total, especially if this is a blowout. I mean, -9 spread's pretty decent. Could get carried away quite quick, especially if De'Aaron Fox is on form, and we're going to get into that in a little bit here. So in terms of juice and just general odds, what I'm looking at on Kevin Huerter, he's only hit this 36% of the time this season, and a lot of that's towards the beginning of the season, but also the juice is quite favored here towards the under 11.5. All the way up at -125 at the most, and then 50-50 on a couple sports books here. Similar concept for Sabonis here on the under 8.5 assists. He has been trending up on his assist prop, but you can see again, still juice towards that under. This time, pretty general consensus on that under, all the way up at -125 on DraftKings. Again, similar to Hurdy, has only gone over 39% of the time this season. What's really interesting to me here is the away splits. I don't normally pay too much attention to away splits, but when you're looking at both these guys together, it's pretty interesting that on Sabonis, you have a 23% hit rate, and then on Kevin Huerter, you have about a 25% hit rate. So both these guys significantly drop in averages when they're playing away, which is pretty good to see. And it's pretty good to see that it happens for both of them, right? 7.3 average away compared to his 8. And then on Kevin Huerter, 10.6 versus 9.8. So on an individual basis, I don't like to kind of look into away splits, but when you're looking at two guys kind of performing together on the same team, it does make sense to kind of see how they're both playing in a specific game scenario. And what I like about these two picks is actually De'Aaron Fox. So we're not taking De'Aaron Fox, but I like how he's been playing recently. He has sort of found some form here in the past 2 games. This game was last week versus Atlanta, very poor, but then versus Golden State away and versus Dallas away, he dropped 29 and 34 points. So he doesn't have as many problems playing away as those other two players. You can see 61% hit rate. When we drop it to away, 58% hit rate. And he's actually found some recent form in the past 4 away games. So what does this have to do with Kevin Huerter and Sabonis? Well, if Fox is scoring a lot of points, that's going to mean less opportunity for the ball to be in Sabonis' hands. And a lot of these points that Fox is going to score are not going to be assisted by Sabonis. Just like we did for Dillon Brooks, we could check De'Aaron Fox's points assisted. His 2-point field goals are unassisted 83% of the time. It's if he starts hitting threes, yes, they're going to be assisted a bit more, and that's where Sabonis might get some assists. But in general, 70% of his field goals are unassisted, so I'm not too concerned if De'Aaron Fox does have a crazy game that Sabonis is going to be getting a lot of the assists. I just don't think it's going to happen. And as I went over, the total is quite low. Spread is high. It's not really a good game state for everyone to be popping off this game. If De'Aaron Fox is popping off, I think it's going to be him alone. And then maybe Sabonis getting some points there too. Last thing to check is just Memphis defense versus these certain positions. But this shooting guard position, the Memphis Grizzlies are third in points allowed. So that is a very tough matchup for Kevin Huerter. And if we look at the point guard position, we're going to see De'Aaron Fox is going to have a bit of an easier matchup here. They're about middle of the pack against the point guards. So if De'Aaron Fox feasts tonight, you're going to see Kevin Huerter and Sabonis likely go under their props. Now, as I'm going to lock this back in, I mean, I just can't justify taking Dillon Brooks at 12.5 points and Sengun at 5 assists. With both of these guys being bumped, unfortunately, this play just looks chalk to me. So I can't be taking the over 12.5 points and the over 5 assists on this. I'm going to have to replace them. So unfortunate that this got bumped as I'm recording this video. But what you could technically do, since they both got bumped, is go under 5 assists on Sengun and then under 12.5 points on Brooks. As much as I like this pairing, I don't know if I could justify the unders, and this is a very good matchup for the overs for this specific stack. So I'm going to have to take these guys out. I'm going to replace them in a second, but I'm not going to be doing a whole analysis. I'm just going to do the stack and end this off with a 6 flex. Replace Sengun and Brooks. I'm going to go with Kevin Durant under 5 assists and Grayson Allen under 11.5 points. Just to quickly look at Grayson Allen, he set at 10.5 on FanDuel, 11.5 on all the other sportsbook. You could see heavy juice towards that under 11.5. Wouldn't be surprised if this one gets bumped to 11. Which you see Caesars all the way at minus 135, heavy juice on the under, and 63% hit rate at 10.5. When you bump that up to 11.5, 54% hit rate. So you can see how this extra point, just like Dillon Brooks, just like all the other props you look at, matter very much. So we're going to grab the under 11.5 there. And then on Kevin Durant, it's a bit conflicted, 4.5 and 5.5 on both sports books. So he does clear this quite often at 4.5, but he also pushes it very often at 5. So I do like it as a sort of push line. Could see him getting exactly 5, but if he does get that 4, it's going to be a very high likeliness that Grayson Allen is also going on that 11.5 points. So that's going to be the slip for today. Here it is again if you want to look through it, and let's just lock this one in.